tell something about myself, which because you met probably my colleague Chiara and my colleague Leah, and possibly also Veronica from the Lifelong Learning platform that is with us. Happy to see some colleagues from a partner of the project from Mull Digital, Dea and Anna. So it's good to have you. So I work for the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, which is another partner in this project. We focus a lot on participation and well-being of children and young people. I'm also happy to see some colleagues from a partner of the project from Mull Digital, Dea and Anna. So it's good to have you. So I work for the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, which is another partner in this project. We focus a lot on participation and well-being of children and young people. Okay, can I ask for those who are using camera, if you could do a thumbs up if you see the slide for module 2 on the screen. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So these are just a little recap, which are the things that many of you already said, looking at access and participation on a spectrum of power to influence, the different contributions of participation as a human right, of value, and contributing to well-being. You mentioned that. Learning can be for, through, and about participation. That's Elena's last point. Thank you. There's a difference between the use of the word participation that normally is used, you know, people are there. So we say, we had 20 participants. 20 people participated in this course that basically attended. And in here, we're looking more about a political dimension of participation, which is influence. There are different ways of sharing power in order to create influence, consulting, collaborating, or leading the decisions. We're going to look into that. And there are different moments in a cycle in which one can influence through participation. So in this module, it's going to be all about stories, actually. I'll bring you some project or practice stories, 6 of them, looking at different applications of participation and learning, and also different ways in which the power was shared with learners. But I actually wanted to start with your own stories and with a little small group conversation. In the past session, I know that you were asked what blocks participation. And now I actually want to ask a different question, which is to come back to a moment, even if it's a very small one, where you felt you could influence your learning or educational path. And you can go as far as you want in down your memory lane. Yeah. So if possible, just to help review a little bit the concepts for from the past session. This is a standard cycle of educational practice where you have some entity, normally an organization and people. So it could be a school and teachers, but it could also be a teacher training institution and the trainers. And there's a cycle where you define the priorities of what you are teaching or what you're offering as a training opportunity, where you understand what the learners know and need so that you can design adapted learning methods. Then you need to find and distribute resources to apply those learning methods. So for instance, if you decide that you're going to use digital assisted teaching methods, you need to find and distribute those digital resources that support your choice. Then you will actually implement the learning activities or teaching activities with the learners. And then there will be a moment where you look back and you evaluate how that went, and you also share the insights with others. So what we are saying in this cycle is that in any moment, there are different degrees of learner influence that can happen. So from not involving them at all because you cannot involve them. For instance, if you're a teacher and you're responsible for carrying um, compulsory assessment. Let's say in Portugal, I'm from Portugal, I did not say that. In Portugal, you have national exams at the end of the second cycle and third cycle. You cannot change that. So it's not a power you can give the learner to influence. But within that, maybe there's other moments of decision making that can be given. So for instance, national exams are educator-led. There's nothing learners can do about it. But if they could, or if there's a way to involve them, or maybe in the process towards that, there are different degrees you can consult them, you can ask or inquire in different ways, you can collaborate with them, or you could actually allow learners to lead the decision making. So when you bring that together, so let's say, for instance, let's say that I am a trainer and I'm trying to design or choose the best learning methods that deal with the group that I have in front of me. Let's say I already understood what is the learner's social profile. I understand what their specific learning needs are. And so I'm at the stage of designing learning methods. I could take a small step there of consulting with them. So what do you think would work best? Here are 5 options. Which one would work best for you and why? Or can we actually collaborate and at co-creating the learning methods that we're going to use? Or maybe this is a flipped classroom situation, or it's a peer teaching situation. And you know what? This is the learning goal. This is what we understand about the situation. Why don't you take the lead for this hour in designing the session in which we're going to learn this? So that would be a learner-led example. And so my question to you is, thinking about your educational path, is there a personal experience of influencing your learning where that you can remember and that you can share? If you can, make reference to the cycle. Where did it happen in the educational path? And what power did you have? Were you consulted? Could you actually lead the decision? Did you collaborate with an educator or an institution? And what impact did that have on you that you can still remember that? I'm going to ask if the question is clear. So you can, if you're not using video, you can still use the little thumbs up question. And if it's not clear, you can just open your mic and ask how I can make it better for you. Hello, Muhammad. I think I didn't say hello before. I didn't see you live.
Hello, Louis. How are you doing?
I'm
How are
doing
you
well.
doing, everyone? So this is my first time I've joined you. So yeah, I sorry for having messed out the first session.
No problem,
Uh,
Muhammad.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, the first question that triggers me is the first one that you tackled. I mean, instantly. Uh, could you make it clear a little bit?
Yes, I'll give some examples. So, for instance, I had very little choice of what I could learn or study in my whole educational path until I got to university, because there were elective courses. So I had to choose 2 out of 10 possibilities, let's say. And for instance, that is an experience that impacted me because I felt, first of all, a sense of curiosity. Well, I'm really interested about these 2. I also felt a bit confusion because I was like, how the hell am I supposed to know which one would be better? But at least I had the power to decide, to direct my studies. And that made the experience feel more meaningful for me. So if I would look at the cycle, I probably was at the stage before learning methods, where the university was trying to understand what learners know and need. and I was consulted, so I could make a decision for myself about what I wanted, which courses I wanted. And I was consulted, meaning I was not totally leading the decision, because the university told me, just because you choose these ones, that does not mean you're gonna get them, because we might not make enough students to run this elective course. Yeah. So I didn't have total power on whether I was going to do that. Participation, some case studies. So I have six cases. I'm going to run through them in different degrees of detail, both in the interest of time, but also yeah, because in some I just want to make a point. If there's one that is really interesting, you say, oh, wait, I want to know something more about this. That's okay. Just turn on your mic and ask the question. I tried to make a selection of participatory process that have different purposes. So some of them were a methodology to reach better research or learning outcomes. Others were really to influence the quality of the educational practice itself. And one, it serves all of those, but it also had a larger aim of creating civic engagement of children. So let's go through these. So the first one I brought because it's very natural. It's about using play-based methods, participatory play-based methods in research. And basically the attitude of the researcher, she's researching the different things, is to kind of allow the play to evolve naturally and then join in. So what she was trying to do is she was trying to understand what the learners knew and need. And so it was a form of consultation, really. But then she was actually playing with the children at the same level as part of the research process. And so in this photo that I'm showing, you can see that she is playing with dolls. So she didn't actually have prescribed toys. She had a bag with lots of different toys, and she just put them there and allowed children to naturally pick up the toys that were more meaningful for them. And then as the children picked up certain dolls, the researcher would use indirect questioning to understand how those dolls represented something in children's lives. And this method can be used very, very early in life. And it's a form of consultation that is done through play. And play is a language, in particular in relation to children, is a language that children tend to master. Ideally, we should never lose that skill, but it's a tool that can help connect the world of adult and childhood. So I like this example very much as a way of participatory consultation, in the context of interaction. This is another one I'll just browse. That actually just one slide is enough to show you. It's also a research method. So in this, they wanted to improve the quality of early childhood education setting. And one of the things they thought is, oh, we're going to change the uniform of the staff working there. But we work with toddlers. They are 2 years old and even less. How do we ask them how to be involved in this? And this is important because children are on our laps. They're constantly touching us. So the texture and the color of our uniforms matter to these children. So they created, it's a form of sensory-based research. They created different playstations where children could experiment with the fabrics. They were hanging in different ways and putting different things. And they had, the researcher or the person doing this assessment was noticing which fabric children spent the most touching and playing with. And then based on those observations, they picked the fabric and the color that was going to be used on the staff uniform. So this is a sensory-based consulting participation with toddlers, for instance, used to improve the quality of education in an early childhood education setting. Yeah, so that's it. Consultation, understanding what learners know and need. So this one is a bit more complex, and this is the one that it's mostly collaborative between children and adults, and it has a larger intention of engaging learners in a long-term civic engagement process around school gardens. So in here, it really involved many stages, from understanding what the learners wanted and need, to designing the learning methods or the practices, implementing the activities in collaboration, and then evaluating back on how the whole experience went. So just to tell you a bit about this project, different neighborhoods in Milan had a budget to create 6 school gardens. And they worked with this organization called Abecita, that is specialized in participatory processes with communities. So this took about 3 years from imagining until completion of the school community gardens. I'm going to show you how they work together. So in the beginning, it was a kind of an imagining session, not only with children, but also with school staff, some parents, explaining a little bit what they want to create in the different gardens. So that was the starting point. Then they asked children to draw what they would like to see in those gardens. And children draw in their own way, or sometimes they explained what they wanted. And this is all a data that the organization collected. And after this, they could identify that there were certain elements that got repeated in the different drawings and stories. And so the organization drew each of those elements and made this grid of possibilities that came out of the answers from the students. With this grid, with the drawings, they went back to the students and they asked, okay, pick your 5 favorite ones to have in your school garden. And this is how they identified the priorities of what children wanted to have there. Then, once they agreed on what were the most needed and wanted things, and there were arguments for why the children wanted, in one municipality, Colina, and in the other municipality, Pista Colorata, that they discussed with the children to decide what were the best elements. So when the elements were chosen, they actually, this is again for you, Mufida, they actually tried them on the space that was assigned to the garden. They drew the paths and the places where these different things were supposed to be, to see if it really worked, and to try to find the best disposition for the elements in the garden. As you can see, this is a modality of collaborative participation, because they are right there sharing the work of assessing where the elements go. And also, when they finally decided where the elements got displayed, the children in the different schools also helped constructing the infrastructure of the park. And even after the park was done, they helped defining the rules of how you're supposed to use that park safety. And they had volunteer roles in monitoring whether those rules were implemented in the garden that was attached to their school. Okay, I'm going to stop trying to think of other shapes or other ways of representing the information that would have more meaning. I apologize for the quality of this photo. What you see here is an intermediate stage moving from a pyramid to a volcano. And so that's how at least one of the schools came up with the idea of a happy and healthy volcano that has a bottom part, a middle part, and a top part. Bottom always, middle often, top sometimes. And different versions of this volcano were created in different early childhood settings. The results was this nicely designed thing. I can actually go back and show you. So you can see when we asked, so what did you find out that children wanted that you didn't know already? And one of the things that they found out through this research, for instance, was that children really enjoyed playing and jumping safely in puddles. meaning when it rains, because the tendency of the early childhood settings is if it's raining, we're going to keep children inside. And children actually saw that as an opportunity to play and to explore. And if they were protected enough, then there's no reason why they could not do it. And so that actually informed the policy across the county of how the educators were dealing with weather. And this is Ireland, so the weather is not particularly sunny all the time. So there's actually a lot of moments where it's raining outside. And so they turned that condition into a learning opportunity thanks to the participation of very young children. This was shared also with decision makers, local decision makers, and there were sessions of sharing it with parents and the practitioners in the area. So I'm going to move on. This is a similar process, but it's with more mature children, but you could actually use it with adults, or you can use it in any circumstance. It's called photo voice. It was used to also improve the conditions of a service. This was not an educational service, it was actually a hospital. And so a link that I make here is that, so a lot of these children had some kind of health condition that made them be in the hospital for long periods of time. Either it was a chronic condition or a recurring condition or an acute condition. And so they gave them photos, and they asked, take photos of the things you like the most and the things you like the least in this service. And children just went on and took photos of it, and then they analyzed the results together. So they were both trying to understand what they needed, but also to evaluate the quality of the service that was being given. So some of the things that they found out, for instance, here you have, this is in the Netherlands, Anna, she was 12, and she took a photo of the door of her room, which had these open windows that people were constantly peeking through. When there were visitors coming, they would look inside to see who's in there. There's a constant exposure to light and the outside, so she didn't feel that it was very private. And so this was something that was a standard there, and they didn't even think it might bother children. And the same issue was with privacy, but also the light coming through the windows to the outside. And so with this very simple method of consulting through using photos, the services could understand very simple things that they could do to improve the quality of what was offered. Yeah. And the last one, this is a form of collaborative participation, but it's really about giving choice in the learning process. So children get to choose how they are learning. So this is part of the larger field of differentiated education, differentiated instruction, which can be, in this case, I'm going to apply it to learning preferences, differences in how you learn, but it could also be applied to specific learning needs, addressing different cultural understandings or needs preferences. Differentiation can be applied to all kinds of circumstances. So the skills that you learn when you apply this are applicable to a range of other social profiles. So here, this is also a project from the Netherlands, and here children are given a choice in their learning path towards a certain outcome. So what this project does, 3D education, it recognizes there are three big dimensions of learning, and that children have a preference for one of them, or at least as a starting point. One of them is more sequential and analytical. So these are children that need very clear aims, that stick to the essential points, and probably need a lot of time alone to learn. Or they prefer to start alone. So I'm going to ask here, who would identify with this path of learning? If you would choose, who would choose this one? You can raise your hand or use an emoji. Okay, Mohammed, starting by yourself with clear aims and essential points. Also Chiara, and I don't see anyone else. Okay, let's see.
Relational.
Relational. You would pick relational.
Way of learning, yes.
So the interactive relational is about expressing, it's about verbalizing, externalizing what's going on inside. It's about making associations with things inside and outside, and often a preference for working in pairs because you get to talk about what's going on. Yeah. And so many times in educational paths, in educational settings, you don't welcome that. You don't want you talking to your neighbor because you're disrupting the class. So who would pick interactive relational learning pathway if you would be given the choice?
Yeah, if I'm not sure, I would opt also for the systematic practical, that is getting accustomed to the group work. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the more collaborative I am, the more I can attach to more people and get to know more about their backgrounds and so on.
absolutely. So that's the one of the advantages of this third way, which they call systemic practical. It's about gathering information, not only about the topic, but also what does everybody know? What does everybody in my group know about this topic? Are we starting from scratch? No, everybody has something to say.
Indeed,
So
yes,
this
indeed.
path privilege, as you say, group work. And just a point to what you're saying that I want to say, children, this is a way of understanding something about children's learning preferences, but this practice, the author says a concept that says you need to match and stretch, meaning sometimes you match the learning preference of the child, and other times you encourage children to stretch their learning preference. So for instance, they would go, Mohammed, this is not that you would do this, just to use you as an example. Mohammed, I noticed that you, every time that I give an assignment where you get to choose one of the paths, you tend to choose, let's say, interactive, why don't you this time choose the sequential path just to see how you do at this, or to see if you get better at blah blah blah. So the teacher has a role, as a collaborative role in encouraging or guiding the students in their choices.
So here is
So
the
yeah,
teacher is the teacher in this case is monitoring.
yeah, totally. It's constantly monitoring the process that they offer and how the children are responding, the learners.
Yeah,
Mufida, you
he's
want
also
to add something to this?
yeah, he is always on the under the service.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mufida? Initiation in this program can happen in three ways. What I was showing you could be in parallel, so you choose one of the three paths, but it could also be sequence. So for instance, you could start first with essential information, have a moment to talk about it, and then have an opportunity to apply it. Or it could be in a circle, could be information, meaning, practice, information, meaning, practice in a cycle around the same theme or the same project. So there are different ways in which you could do this. The example that I wanted to give you is one of the parallel routes. It's about developing reading comprehension. And so, for instance, in the sequential route, children would start by reading alone in silence, and then they give like a little test, that like a quiz that tests the most essential things that they got from the text. In the interactive route, they read in pairs, they can read out loud and they can listen to each other, and then they make a mind map of different associations that they made with the text. And in the systemic route, children read and can repeat, because repetition is important for people that align more with this way of learning. And then there's a kind of a collage or a collection of everyone's contributions with lots of details that is made in group work. And so if you see the skill, if the learning outcome is reading comprehension, all of the children develop that outcome to a certain extent, but they got a choice in the path that they were taking. And I think that this is also helpful when you have specific needs around either disability or language or neurodivergence. This is some differentiation is the only way you can really create a truly inclusive educational environment, I think. Before we move to the next step, is there something that you want to say about these three cases? something that showed up, either a question or intrigue? Thank you for clarifying the difference between colloquial and standard Arabic, Mohammed. Those were the words that I should be using. Any comment on the last three practices? Nope. Okay, very good. I hope this is inspiring for you. You know, I don't know if you're educators or if you're studying education or if you are, you know, I hope that the main point of sharing these is that I'm also, through real life examples, giving you different methods in which participants can, in which learners can be involved in influencing the learning process. So this is an adaptation from children's rights. Mufid, at the beginning, you said you cannot teach about rights without having the process respecting those rights. So this is where we get to talk a little bit about this. So if you are taking your some steps into making your teaching or your educational process participatory, and you're opening up to giving power to the learners over the process, what are the requirements for that process to be meaningful for everyone involved? And so these 9 requirements come from the 9 requirements on meaningful child participation that were developed by the Committee on the Rights of the Child, but really they are applicable to any setting where there's participation as a form of power. And so these requirements, they can be grouped into 3 types or 3 dimensions. One is, what do the learners experience in the process of participation? Thank you, Marie and Katerina, for and Mohammed for the comments in the chat. So some requirements are related to the learner's experience. Others are related to the commitment that the educator has to make, and other requirements are related to the learning environment or the learning process itself. And so for the learner's experience, you actually, in your resource pack, which you received by email and also at the beginning of the session, there is a more extended explanation of each of these requirements. So I will not go very extensively over these right now. So for the learning experience, it's about being respected. And here we're talking about everything related to their learner profile, but also what's happening inside the learner. It's about feeling that it's relevant, that there's a reason why I'm being asked to participate or why I get this opportunity to participate. It's voluntary, meaning I'm not forced or coerced to become involved. And I know what will happen to my participation. That means I have all the information needed to be able to participate. I think Chiara was mentioning that coming out of the group, that sometimes there's no infrastructure through which I can even influence to begin with, let alone having an experience of influencing educational path, having an impact on my life. And so it starts with information, but then also transparency of the whole process of participation. Thank you, Leah, for putting the source from this. In terms of the educator's commitment, maybe I don't know to what extent I am literal about this, but the idea is that participation and creating participatory process is a skill. Mufida, I'm going to come back to your point around trust. Participation is a skill. There's actually, I'm not going to say a science, but there's a whole body of work around studying what makes participation meaningful and methods of participation. And so you as educators or researchers or working in an education provider institution, you can get better at participation. You can become proficient in participation. And I think that that's one of the reasons why you decided to attend this course. So know that this is just a little beginning. There's a whole bucket load of things that you can learn. And if you have specific questions or interests for a particular field, you can ask me directly. Actually, I will leave my contacts at the end, and I can try to direct you to either people or resources that can help you. So just know that there's training and knowledge available to support you in this path. And the other one is about accountability, which means in very practical terms, you come back to the people that you participate. How many surveys and questions and focus groups and conversations did you have where you were asked for your opinion and you ask, so what do you think about this? And you go and you give yourself, and then you never know what happens to that information, how it was used. Did it matter? Did it actually mean something? Did it transform things? So accountability is a part of the educator's commitment. And then the learning environment is related to a little bit the line that we saw in the first session. The line of accessibility needs to be accessible and inclusive. So here we're talking about infrastructure, but also language, also financial accessibility, needs to be adapted to the needs of the people that it's serving, and it needs to be safe and sensitive to risk. The process of participation also needs to be safe and sensitive to risk, meaning sometimes participating is a risk. So if you ask students in some countries what they think about their institutions, educational institutions, they can suffer a backlash for answering that question, for instance. But this is a very extreme case. And I think maybe Hadil, the issue of safety and the educational paths is really, really highlighted by the story that you shared in the first part of today's session. Mohammed is saying there's something called democratic participation in the sense of education as such. I totally agree with you. I totally agree that education could be a form of democratic participation as well. Okay, I'm going to ask you to look at these 9 requirements and think of a learning space or environment that you are connected to, either as a student or as an educator or as a researcher. Just pick one. And my question to you is, which one of these 9 feel the hardest to implement in your learning environment? Could be also a workplace. A workplace is a learning environment. So if you pick one of these and you think, okay, if we ought to start some participatory process involving the workers or the learners or the users, what would be the hardest requirement to implement and why?
So from my group, we were also checking like all the criteria. And Sanam, for example, was telling that for her it was difficult to know how to adapt it to their needs because you discover more what they were their needs in the evaluation form, that they tell you, oh, this is missing, that in advance. And in my case, that also we work with a lot of academias, like all school academics, that it will be like supported by training, that they come, they deliver their lecture, but it's difficult to link like all this academic knowledge to training. So this is why we are pushing that for every academic content, we need something more practical, something more related to skills. So people feel that they are not only listeners.
I agree. And I want to connect that to what Mohammed was saying, that Mohammed, you said informal methods. And I think at some point we coupled things that are not to be coupled. We associate interactive, collaborative methods with informal or non-formal education, and directive, information-focused, presentation-led with formal. But the setting, non-formal and informal, and the method, they don't need to be connected. We could be doing play-based in our PhDs. There's no reason. It's just the way through which we're going to learn and research. But for some reason, we created these associations, and that's why now we cannot play in our adult life and cannot be serious in our childhood life. Thank you, Elena, for sharing a glimpse of your group. Mohaban, I know you have your hands up. I want to privilege people that still didn't have a chance to talk in the big group. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
We can come back to you. All right, Katarina.
Okay, so in our group, we talked about three different ways of education. So we talked about inclusive education with special needs learners, where accessibility, inclusivity is very important in creating good learning environments that go in favor of valuing their needs and the learning process. Then we also talked about non-formal education, where transparent and informative is very important, especially when we present different mobility programs available to young people, because it can be a lot at once, and to make it in understandable way for them. Mm-hmm. And then we also talked about secondary education, where voluntary participation of learners is something that is important as well. So this just shows that we should definitely start from what level of education we're talking about, what years, and then we dive in. But each of these elements are very common and repetitive. So it does help to refer to them when we look into different practices.
Yeah, and it's true that according to the level of education, some things are more or less negotiable. So for instance, in Portugal, we have compulsory education. So that's already one thing that it's not voluntary. You don't get to choose whether you want to go to school or not. You have to go to school.
Yes. So yes.
You have,
I mean,
30 seconds because we need to close the.
I won't exceed that much time. So yeah. I mean, such points that can be that have been tackled in our discussion, where the relevancy, accountability, and the adaptation to the needs of the learners, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of the first, speaking of the first point, that is relevancy. It's crucial to to know how to handle it when it comes to, for example, volunteering initiatives, like teaching, for example, such such modules let's say, for students, in my case, I'm an English student. I cannot, for example, go for other majors, you know. Mm-hmm. So in this case, I need to be more serious while handling such such backgrounds, you know. So yeah, it depends on how much you can give. You can give while allocating your time and effort to particular backgrounds. So yeah, I mean, adaptation to the needs. It's good.
I really need those last 3 minutes to complete the
Did I exceed?
Okay. You did exceed those 30 seconds, yes. It's okay, but it was really good effort. Thank you.
It's just a wrap up. So yeah, I mean, that's my That's my
No worries. I would love to give you all the time in the world, but I'm managing many different agendas, which is
Okay,
still giving
get
you an
you.
option, the time that I have, and the other
I get you.
participant.
I get you. So yeah, that's my wrap up. I mean, if we can say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
All
welcome.
right, I'm gonna share just the screen one last time, if this works. Yes, wrap up module 2. So the points that we went over today, starting with your personal stories, is that choosing or having power has an important impact in one's life and sense of well-being. The participation methods need to take in consideration why you want to participate, who's participating, and when and what power is being shared. You can use participation to improve quality of educational practice, and there are requirements for making it meaningful, and those are the ones that we just went through. A little homework for the next session. That's not it. We will do a case clinic on an educational practice. So pick a situation or an educational process or a lesson or an educational institution, something that you feel could be improved or enriched through learner participation. And what we're going to do is we're going to offer that case to our little work group, and we're going to be mini consultants, and we're going to come up with ways in which we could take one step in making that space or that process more participatory. That's what we're going to do in the next session. So have a think and try to identify one practice. And don't worry, there will be several to choose from. So if you can't come up with anything, there will be other colleagues in your group that will. And now, just to close, I'd like to ask you, just for our own evaluation, but also to improve the next session in the course overall, can you please write in the chat one thing that summarizes your experience of this workshop, of this session, and one thing that you would like to put out there that would help improve the third and last session. And while you do that, while you write in the chat what you see here in the session, Mohammed made a specific request for, was it youth exchange activities, Mohammed?
Yes. Yeah. I did ask you about if someone here, I mean, has the, or you say knows such exchange programs that can be offered for young people in particular.
In Morocco.
Yes.
That's an important part. Yeah.
Yeah. Like training courses, for instance, or something to get involved into.
So send them Mohammed's way.
Yeah, if someone has the knowledge through that, I mean, I'll be high privileged.
Okay, please leave your comments, your one sentence that summarizes today's session and one improvement for the next session or the course that you could leave us with. Please, you can write it and then leave as we are now at the end of our time for today's session. Thank you so much for being with us. If there's anything that you need from me specifically, I will also send my email in the follow-up email, and know that the video will be available tonight. I don't know. Is it maybe? I don't know when we will edit and send back the videos. And also we'll also send the slides of the session.